And for more on the global inflation and everything about it, Dan McClory, our good friend, is back, Managing Director, Head of China for Boustead Securities. Good to have you, Dan. Let's start with the U.S. first, and we'll kind of go around the world a little bit. But we saw those numbers out of the U.S. relatively flat for the last essentially 2 months, and I think a large part of that has to be energy. Wall Street seems to be absolutely going ballistic over it. So I suppose the idea is that maybe the worst is over, at least in the U.S. Are we right?
Well, I hope so, Phil. I mean, it's always great to be on the big show, first of all, and I appreciate you having me. You know, the dependence on energy and that being a key part, to your point, is absolutely correct. That may have perhaps the correction and the slight downward trend in energy prices may have impacted it. But, you know, there are great expectations for inflation to start getting under control with everything that's being done by the Fed. So hopefully it's going to start moving in that direction. And I contrast that to, you know, when we go around the horn and look at other parts of the world where they're taking slightly different and sometimes radically different approaches.
Well, let's do that. Let's talk about Europe very quickly, because they did not raise rates until recently, and they waited and they waited and waited. And I get it. They have a sort of another issue, which is a bit of an energy crisis with what's happening in Ukraine as well. So their situation is much more complicated, but the end result is they are paying more for food, they are paying more for energy, and they do have an inflation problem that, quite frankly, I think they're behind the curve when it comes to getting it under control.
They are. You know, if the U.S. came in, you know, positively at only 8.5%, Europe is about 8.9. The UK is headed to double digits, frankly. So, you know, we think it's rough and tough and not looking so great here. And in fact, month over month, Europe was up. So their relative percentage inflation is going up, as is the UK. They absolutely have that Ukraine crisis in their own backyards to be dealing with. But they have taken a different approach to monetary strategy, and it's reacting slightly differently.
Dan, what do they need to do?
They've got to get less dependent on Russian oil and Russian gas, but you know, that's not going to happen overnight. The world is interdependent nowadays. Let's push conflicts to the side for the moment. They're going to have to consume less. They're going to have to get by with less, or they're going to see relatively rampant inflation. You know, food exports, you talk about grain, you talk about other things, all greatly impacted because of where they are in the world. I also think they should be slightly raising rates to try to get things under control. But, you know, the UK and perhaps Europe, not too far behind, you know, is on the verge of double-digit inflation.
Right, and when we came out of sort of the Omicron wave, you know, consumers went absolutely ballistic and just, I guess, bought everything. And Europe saw the sort of same wave. Now we look at China. While they haven't had a lot of inflation, they are now sort of coming out of their own lockdowns and beginning to spend money and getting into sort of the sweet spot of going out to spend. And eventually, you have to think that there is going to be inflation, but it's kind of a good inflation. It means that the economy is moving forward. I don't know what your thoughts are, but does China need to do anything to control it or prevent it? They seem to be in kind of a middle ground right now.
Yeah, China has taken a very distinct and direct approach, as we know. They have continued to reduce interest rates in an attempt to stimulate the economy. But remember, China doesn't believe in stimulus. They're not throwing around boatloads of money like the U.S. did. So they believe the economy is going to be corrected as a result of perhaps slightly looser monetary policy, but they've got a very strict zero COVID policy. So that zero COVID policy has the effect of constraining factories, places of production, the importation of raw materials, and certainly when the rest of the world is hurt by decreased demand, it has an impact in China. So I would say, you know, the China outlook is, first of all, there's not really an outlook in terms of GDP growth. It's just been, you know, we're going to not really give those kind of numbers anymore. We're going to see how it all plays out. But when you look at inflation, I think there could very well be an uptick in the services. Services have held up very well, have actually started to come back very well. They're far less reliant on raw materials, commodity prices, factory levels, things like that. So if you're looking for a lift in China, I think you'll continue to see it in the services area. I think manufacturing is going to be challenged, if not troubled.
Dan McClory, always good to see you, my friend. Boustead Securities. It'll be interesting to see what the end result of all these attacks on inflation are from around the world. We're all dealing with it in our own way, I suppose. Good to see you, my friend.
We are. Thank you.